Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL.
Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Tompsett along with my partner in crime Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
I need free agency to hurry up and get here. We're peak off season, Greg, and I can't take it anymore. I need some real news, not all this flying around with every tweet that comes around. I need something solid coming up. But other than that, I'm great because we did get some news here this week, some NFL news to talk about. And so it was a little bit of a whirlwind so far already this week.
Yeah, obviously, we're going to focus on the Bills tonight, but we'd be remiss not to mention, obviously Aaron Rodgers going back to the Packers, 4 years, $200 million, crazy amount of money.
Bean looks like a genius for that
seriously.
Allen deal.
Locking up Josh Allen's going to just look better and better. Wait for the more deals to come in. It's going to look better and better. Russell Wilson traded to the Broncos, so a huge haul, 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 3 pretty decent players, couple, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, and then obviously Drew Lock kind of thrown in for fun. Going back to the Seahawks and Russell Wilson going to the Broncos. I know we talked about it the day it happened. I sneaky kind of think it helps the Bills' odds of winning home field advantage because that AFC West is a buzzsaw now. Derek Carr, the 4th best quarterback in the division. Russell Wilson, the 3rd best, or whatever you think of him and Justin Herbert. But I love the fact that now the Broncos are no longer 4 free wins for the Chiefs and the Chargers. That's good stuff.
Yeah, it is. I thought it was a little bit weird how a lot of Twitter, at least, panicked about that and was like, oh, now we need to make a big splash in Buffalo and they're competing with the Bills. And I don't know. At this point, I don't know who Russell Wilson is. I know there were some reports coming out that things sort of disconnected between he and Pete Carroll. So maybe the on-field performance that we saw over the last year had something to do with behind the scenes, but he had talented guys. Like I've seen tweets
Tyler
like,
Lockett, DK Metcalf.
Yeah, they're like, who's going to stop him, Jerry Jeudy, and Courtland Sutton? It's like, well, I think his receivers were probably just as good last year. I mean, I think Denver's
and the line's about the same as what Seattle had.
Sure, yeah, I think Denver's maybe a little bit better overall, but yeah, I think we do this every March, whether it's trades or free agency, and we see something added, and everybody, ESPN starts putting out these graphics.
How are we going to top that?
Yeah, everyone starts blowing up like, oh, this is a dream team. They're going to really make a run. And honestly, I felt the same way exactly as you did, is that, like, let that division beat up on themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And then, give the Bills an easier path. Because I do think ultimately Bills are probably going to be in one of the better positions. I'm not sold on Mac Jones. I don't think the Patriots are going to get vastly better, and the rest of the division still got some catching up to do. So let them beat up on each other, and then maybe the Bills get a nice easy path to that 1 seed this year.
I do think that Russell Wilson to the Broncos, with the talent that was on that roster, jumps them up into the tier with the Ravens and the Chargers and the Bengals and like that next group, but they're not with the Bills and the Chiefs. Like, that's the top tier.
Not until I see it.
Yeah, that so don't get me wrong. If Russell Wilson recaptures what he was, 3 years ago, absolutely. Like that is a special player. We haven't seen the same thing. So I agree. Let's wait and see where that comes from. Good question here from Kellen. We've gotten this a lot before we jump into everything here. The compensatory pick allocation thing, I'm going to try to explain it real fast. The biggest thing people miss is it's not just if a team has someone sign a player away, you get a pick. I've gotten that a lot. Like, oh, how much money would Trubisky have to sign for us to get a compensatory pick? It's not that. It's they take the overall amount of free agents that you sign and the overall amount of free agents that you lose. And if that is a net loss, so say the Bills have Mitch Trubisky and Levi Wallace and Harrison Phillips and Jerry Hughes all signed somewhere else, and the Bills only add 2 or 3 free agents, then yes, you had a net loss, and whatever the contract that nets out, depending on who you add, that goes there. So if we also sign a guy for as much as Trubisky leaves, then Mitch is canceled out. If we sign a guy for as much as Levi Wallace signs, we cancel that out. You have to sign for lesser. So that it takes letting multiple guys leave and not signing anyone big, and then you get a comp pick. I just don't see that combination working out for the Bills this year.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's tough, right? Well, and so another point to that is not that the Bills are, I don't think the Bills are going to sign Bobby Wagner, but guys that are getting released now, or Shaq Lawson, right? Shaq Lawson's, yeah, people that are already out on the market now prior to the league year starting. If you sign those guys, that does not count towards that.
They have to be a pending unrestricted free agent, someone who was scheduled to be a free agent, not anyone who was released, not anyone who was traded. It only counts if you sign a scheduled unrestricted free agent. So, and it goes the other way. If someone signs AJ Klein or signs John Feliciano, 2 news items we're going to get to here, the Bills would not get any credit for that in the compensatory formula, because 2 of the other items we got this week, the Bills released AJ Klein earlier this week. It created $5.1 million in cap space, and just tonight before we went live, the Bills released John Feliciano, creating another $3.4 million. Those 2 together get the Bills over the hump in the necessary cap space that was needed. They are now, legally under the cap. There's plenty of other moves, extensions, restructures coming. But I can't imagine you were surprised by either of those moves.
No, not at all. And I think we've talked about it a couple times on this show throughout the salary cap show that we did, and just some of these other ones leading up to this point. I think those were the obvious ones to get under that cap. Now, what I will say is, everyone just assumed AJ Klein's gone. I actually think AJ Klein, when the dust settles, we'll probably talk about it later, I think he might be back on a deal where he should be, right? Like, you look at this linebackers, maybe there's some team out there willing to give him something for the small glimpse of what he did against like Seattle. There's dumb GMs.
I would pass around that film all day long if I was AJ Klein.
Yeah, we're going to see dumb GMs here all week next week doing silly things, and you're going to be tweeting out like, oh my God, what, that value doesn't make sense at all. But if it goes the way I think it does, a guy like that will be back on a cheaper, more regular deal. But yeah, no, Feliciano going, what was surprising to me is the early reports were that he was offered a pay cut, but then the Bills didn't actually offer him a pay cut.
You can tell from the folks who had to walk back their statements with specifically per Brandon Bean. He was not.
He saw those tweets and texted out. I was like, no.
Yeah, a couple people got yelled at. A couple people jumped the gun and got yelled at. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure John Feliciano said that he wouldn't have accepted a pay cut. It's just important to note he wasn't offered one, so it didn't matter. He was just released.
I also have said a lot of things when girls broke up with me in the past, and it doesn't mean that the things I said are true.
You can't fire me. I quit.
Yeah, exactly.
So, obviously, there's other things. If anybody is curious on other ways that you can save money getting into free agency, go check out our salary cap spectacular. We went through every possible iteration. I'll give you guys a sneak preview. Our friend Joe Marino is working on his mock off season, and he sent me over a long list of fun extensions, revisions, cuts, releases, free agent signings. A really cool project coming up there. So check that out for him later on. There's a lot of interesting ones there. And that leads us into our discussion tonight.
Well, and, did we touch on Cole Beasley last week? The news that he was approached to seek a trade, and the Bills granted him permission to go ahead and seek a trade.
So I would assume my interpretation of that is it was awful similar to these other discussions where he was approached basically saying, we're not interested in having you back at that cap number. But we're in, and I think Bean has now reiterated the door is not closed. That's not the same as what we've seen with Feliciano, where the door is not closed. They want him back. They just can't afford him at that number. And I think his initial reaction was, well, let me go see, can I get somebody else to take on that contract, and I'll go elsewhere. Which I
think he's going to get a lot of the same things from GMs around the league on that contract. Is like, we'd love to have you, but not at that. We're also going to want, once we trade you, to rework this deal and take a pay cut as well. So I think that's ultimately, we probably won't hear much on a Cole Beasley trade. I'd be surprised if somebody's willing to trade him and take that cap hit.
Yeah, I could see there's a couple scenarios. I went through this with some folks. he would make sense for a team with cap space and a young quarterback who needs development and a safety blanket. Depending on what Houston does in the draft, Jacksonville is the one that I thought of. That, giving Trevor Lawrence an actual safety blanket where, where they're in a spot where he's probably not going to sign there. So their only chance to get a good guy like that or good slot receiver like that probably is to trade for it
and pay for the whole thing.
And that they might say, hey, we'll give you a 6th rounder to take the contract. And then because the Bills save the same amount of money. The Bills save the same money whether traded or released. So it doesn't actually matter for them all that much. It's just seeing if they can shop around to get it, or they're using it as leverage. They actually don't want to trade him. What they want is him to come back and realize, hey, you're not going to get that anywhere else. Why don't you give us $3 million back and stay here and play with us? That's what they're hoping. But yeah, I do think it's curious. I don't think there's a lot of trade targets locations for it, but I don't know it's 0. I think there's a couple. Cool. And I will say, Ronald asked a question here. I was wrong on that. I did think with, we've seen some other pretty iffy offensive linemen get traded, and that although Feliciano was getting paid more than he should, it wasn't terrible. The other team would be taking on the $3.4 million that we saved, which is okay. I actually kind of did think we could have got like a 6th round pick or something there. So I'm sure being called around, I made a joke on Twitter that, he probably called Joe Shane, and then he probably called Brian Dable, and then he probably also called Bobby Johnson, and just made sure, hey, are you guys sure you don't want to trade for Feliciano? But I was a little surprised. I kind of thought he was one we might have been able to sneak a late round pick for.
I think, though, they'll be able to just get him in. I think the Giants makes a ton of sense, and they'll be able to get him in.
I'll be genuinely shocked if he doesn't sign there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a little bit of a game of chicken, right? That Joe Shane's playing. It's like, well, no, I don't want to trade, and we'll just...
Especially if he knows that if you release him, we are his number 1 option.
Right. Yeah. So, I don't know. Good luck to him.
Yeah, God bless him. Wish him all the best.
Yeah.
So tonight we are going to go through. If anyone didn't see last week, we did our offensive wish list. Make sure to go check that out. Tonight we're going to disappoint people the exact same way, because we're going to try to do.
I like my wish list.
People like yours more than mine. We're going to do I'm going to say a realistic wish list. I think that we're going to try to keep it in the realm of possibility. We're probably not going to project a lot, and that gives me a chance to mention.
Well, actually, with the rumors this week, I might go a little wild. I don't know. We'll see.
The Albert Breer report. We've gotten some reasonable confirmation that there's some big name, and he confirmed on the radio that there were 2 big defensive free agents that reached out to the Bills about signing with them, and the reason he presented it as a report was that, hey, we've never really seen this with Buffalo before. Buffalo always kind of hit. We remember the Mario Williams situation. We remember previous free agent, the Charles Clay contract, all the madness. The Bills always had to overpay. Well, now for the first time, now free agents are saying, hey, you guys interested? Because I'd like to come play with that guy. I'd love to come play with 17. And that he was reporting it from that standpoint, not that it was an imminent signing or super likely. And we haven't heard both names, but I know we've heard one name thrown around, and it's not a player that I think is feasible for the Bills to sign. And that's kind of what I tweeted, was that, hey, this is cool. Everybody should be excited about this, that now free agents want to come sign here, and take that as a trend that there's lots of other people who also want to sign with the Bills. But just because some big name free agents reached out to check big, hey, are you guys, interested? And that, of course, they're going to be interested in talented people. It doesn't mean they're all of a sudden going to sign some $20 million a year free agent.
Yeah, and I think some things to keep in mind here are these discounts that we talk about. We've talked about it a bunch over the last couple of weeks here, of like maybe a guy will take a discount to come play for the Bills. If you're talking about a player like that, you're typically talking about a guy past 30, a guy
third, fourth contract.
Yeah, like 32, 33-year-olds who have maybe played for teams that haven't had any success, and they've gotten all their money but haven't had success in their career, and they want one last chance. And even those deals, though, if you're looking at the premier guys in the league, you're still talking like maybe a $2-3 million discount, but still in a $9 to $11 million year range. Like, you're still talking about a substantial amount of money. These guys aren't going to come take half off of their market value to come play for you. So we got to like kind of have realistic expectations of what those discounts are. And a lot of times you're still just kicking them a bonus, right? Like it's like, hey, let's get this cap number down. We'll kick you some extra money and we'll call it a discount, right? And
especially in that first time free agents, that's the biggest one. Whiff on guys who have been like late round draft picks and are about to get their first payday. Those guys are not the ones taking discounts. Those are the ones that sign with Jacksonville and Houston and Detroit for huge money because it's their first.
Then they
chance of generational wealth.
Years.
Then they go.
Right.
You know, it's a
like
later.
That's another thing that's interesting because as fans we would like think like, oh, all these guys must want to win for like that they're players and like this is their jobs, right? They've trained so hard for their lives that you don't have a lot of opportunities at generational wealth, like you're saying. They've made it this far without blowing a knee or ruining their career,
shredding an Achilles, something scary.
Yeah, one opportunity to set your family up forever. Like no, like so when like the Jacksonville Jaguars get a big nighttime player and people are like, why would he go play there? I would do it in a heartbeat. Like there's a
cash that check.
Yeah, because you're gonna have that chance on your third contract to go.
Good example here from Ron. JC Jackson is a perfect kind of example of this situation where he's the kind of player that he was a late round pick for the Patriots. He was making 480,000, 570,000, 750,000. That's the kind of guy that this is his first chance at a payday. He's not signing with anyone at a discount. He's going to go sign with the Jets for 4 years and 80 million or something like that. Cause he's going to go, that's the kind of player that would make sense that isn't going to do a discount. Whereas some of the guys we talk about tonight, we might dabble a little bit at the higher end of, hey, this is the kind of guy that might sign with us. I know. Well, let's work our way into the more exciting positions in defense. So obviously, let's go D tackle, corner, edge at last. Let's start with some of the other ones.
I love that defensive tackle is now considered sexy.
Isn't that fun?
That's fun.
Isn't that fun? Let's start with safeties. What did you have at the safety position in here? And I agree. This was one where technically the Bills are coming in with 4 under contract. They already have Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, DeMar Hamlin, and Jaquan Johnson all under contract. This would be someone who would have to take Jaquan Johnson's spot likely.
Yeah. So this one we went over when we were doing the Lofton exercise and grading out, and we said these needed to improve those two behind, right? We didn't know Poyer and Hyde, fantastic. They're not going anywhere. You have your starters set. Now, thinking about this all week for this show, I'm a big DeMar Hamlin fan, and I didn't get to see enough out of him to say that we're all set at that backup position, but I feel good of his continued development. I know that the Bills have done a good job developing defensive backs, so I'm pretty good there. Like you said, maybe we're replacing Jaquan Johnson because he's just got 1 year left, right? Like this is it for Jaquan, I believe. Either way, the two guys that I had that are possible maybe would be bringing Dean Marlowe back. He had a chance to go out and get something and have a chance. Yeah, have a chance. We know the Bills like him. We know that he liked his time here, and he's a good fit. He's the kind of guy that you could bring him in, and if something, God forbid, knock on wood, were to happen to either of the starters, that you could maybe get by a game or two with Dean Marlowe coming into play. So I don't know what his value is right now, but he'd be a guy that I would...
It'd be a vet minimum.
Yeah, he'd be a guy that I'd bring in and compete with one of those young guys. And maybe he doesn't stick on the roster like the cockroach that he is. And then Jaquiski Tart would be another one that maybe you could get in here. Just a player I like. There's not a lot of great safeties out there. And if I'm going to bring in a guy, it's going to be a guy I like. But I'm also happy to just roll with the 4 that we've got and hope that development continues.
So I wanted Tart quite a bit last year, and it's along the lines of one other here that I'm going to list that is kind of cheating because he's half safety, half linebacker.
Yeah.
He's the same idea as Keanu Neal.
Yeah.
In that this would be if they wanted to play more, or, obviously I got asked a ton about, are we trading Tremaine Edmunds? So if we could trade Tremaine Edmunds and go to a base thick dime defense and
I almost just left the show.
Oh, wait. Is this
true?
real, Chris? That live during the show, the Carolina Panthers just traded for Jimmy Garoppolo from the 49ers? So
we'll have to check that here. I'll check while you talk.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. So I did list that. I listed Keanu Neal. He's probably above where they're at. I think Jaquiski Tart is a great call on a guy that could play a lot of Swiss Army knife spots in a lot of different situations. He's the kind of guy. I picked Ronnie Harrison. He was the guy out of Alabama that was like a super freaky athlete that the Browns picked and just never could really use him properly. I kind of think he's the type of player that you could coach up and be able to get developed and initially play a lot of special teams, probably be a pretty sizable athletic upgrade over Jaquan Johnson. And that, maybe you could train him into being the long-term Jordan Poyer replacement, is that guy who can come down in the box. Just a super freaky athlete, pretty cheap to be able to pick him up, could contribute in special teams, but I don't expect much movement, if any, in the safety mode in that range. I don't know if you do either.
Yeah, no, sorry. I was out over here checking. I have not seen any confirmation of that trade. So anyone in the chat, keep us posted if a trade happens. Last I heard was Jimmy G was having surgery, and until he was fully recovered and throwing footballs, that it was probably unlikely that a trade would go through until those medicals were able to clear.
Expecting it to be later, but that would be interesting.
Yeah. So nothing there.
I'll let you lead off. How about at linebacker?
So linebacker is interesting, right? Because obviously they just released AJ Klein and everybody wants to trade Tremaine Edmunds because of that tweet that went out today. But so I don't think Tremaine Edmunds is going anywhere. As much as people can't stand him or want to move on from him, I think at least for the 2022 Bills, he's the starting linebacker. I don't know that a trade would make sense. So he's there. So then you're really looking at backup, right? And so for me, I had three names. It starts with, I think, AJ Klein. I said it earlier. I think AJ Klein is a guy that's going to come back to the Bills in free agency. And then outside of that, if it's not him, or maybe in addition to him, a guy that I know Eric has liked for a few years, but probably is way past his prime, you could get him on a vet minimum, is Christian Kirksey. Would be a guy that's a fit for just depth linebacker that has played some snaps in the league. So you wouldn't be just going to total inexperience. And then there's one more guy that I've loved in the draft process, but I think would come in and be a good special teamers, is Oren Burks. 6'3", 4.59.
Super athletic.
Yeah, pretty quick guy. I think he would, if you could develop him, could be a decent linebacker for the Buffalo Bills. But he hasn't really had a chance to fully develop yet as a linebacker. And so maybe you just take a chance on a young prospect that hasn't had a chance to develop yet.
Similar, one of my guys was like that, Zaire Franklin from Indianapolis, young, athletic, a lot of special team snaps, and a guy you could pitch on, hey, we kind of think Terrell Dodson can be our linebacker 3, but he's got no lock on that job. Come in, compete. Maybe you take the linebacker 3 job, and we know we have special teams reps. So that kind of area. If they want an AJ Klein type, that kind of level of player as a linebacker 3, Anthony Walker is a guy that I could see floating around if he doesn't get a chance to start anywhere else. Playing 10-20% of the snaps for the Bills is probably better than nothing. Right. And obviously everybody talking in the chat about Bobby Wagner. I don't think Chris,
there's going to be a lot of suitors for Bobby
Chris
Wagner.
Is copying here. He got so unfortunately that trade does not really happen to the best of us. So I don't. So I'll say, if the Bills trade Tremaine Edmunds, sure, go out and sign Bobby Wagner to a 1 or 2 year deal. I just don't see any scenario where that makes sense or where that's going to come into play. But sure, Bobby Wagner is a fun and exciting player who was elite in one of the best down
year last year. I don't know if that's a trend.
He wasn't elite. He was good last year. I think people have the idea that he was bad last year. He was not. He was still good. He just wasn't. He was the best linebacker in the NFL for like a 3 straight year period.
Oh yeah.
And he wasn't that last year. So and I will say, Aaron here bringing it up in the chat. I have a feeling he thinks he's still a $12 to $15 million a year linebacker. I don't know if the market's going to think that, but I guarantee that's what he's looking for initially is to get big money from somebody. So
maybe the market isn't saying the same thing he is, but I think he'll have a number of suitors I don't see the Bills getting into some type of bidding war over a guy like this. So I really think the Bills like Tremaine Edmunds more than Twitter does ultimately. And so the idea of a trade to me just doesn't seem, it would have to be real, like move Brandon Beane off his seat. And I'm sure teams have called. The idea that he could be traded is probably based on we're hearing teams are interested. And he's a guy that league wide makes sense where you look at what are they going to do with his contract? Are the Bills going to be able to keep him? Maybe we can offer up some assets to make them feel like they're getting something for moving on from this guy. But unless it blows Bean away, and I don't know that Tremaine's that kind of player to anyone, that's a tough one for me to see going through.
Yeah, I would need, I know it sounds crazy, but I would need like a first round pick plus something else to like, it's just,
because you got to make up for that talent. You got to
yeah. Like, even if, like, I know the rumor was Pittsburgh, even if we got the 20th pick, like so now we just have to take a linebacker with that pick. And now we have to hope that guy can figure out what's going on and is good in coverage and all those things. Again, I understand. I will say, I get the anxiety of, do we want to sign up for $25 million a year at linebacker? That is
an idea. Can we keep him, Oliver?
Does that impact like some other big time player? That's a totally valid question. It's just, it's a lot easier to debate that than it is to replace a starting middle linebacker in a complex coverage system. That, we'll see where those.
And every time we have these conversations, like, oh, well, if we do this, we definitely can't keep X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Last year, before free agency, Greg, we were having this conversation. Like, there's no way we can get Darrell Williams, Matt Milano back on this team.
And
we
Feliciano,
have to pick one or the other.
And Levi Wallace and Isaiah McKenzie.
Remember all those graphics? You can only pick one. Yeah. Choose one. You can only have
which would you rather have? Darrell Williams or Matt Milano?
Right.
Everyone.
Yeah, we want all the things.
Yeah. So I will let you pick here. I'll lead off with my list. You pick the next position we go to.
Let's go edge. Let's do the edge.
So
are you breaking Lent?
No.
Come on.
I'm not going to. So I think it's most likely that we sign a veteran free agent, just like one of the guys who's pending with the Bills now, like a Melvin Ingram, maybe even like a Dante Fowler. I know obviously there was stuff out there for Shaq Lawson today. We can tell you with confidence, we're 100% sure Shaq Lawson wants to be back. Yeah. And I'm guessing there's a number where Brandon Beane would welcome him back, but I think it's probably like the F.A. Obata number, not anything fun or exciting.
I think some dust has to settle.
Yeah, if Shaq Lawson is our fifth lineman and our, eighth or our fifth D end, our eighth lineman, ninth lineman, that's great. That's a really good problem to have. He's probably a slight upgrade to F.A. Obata. He's probably better than F.A. Obata. I'm fine with that.
And I'm okay with him pushing AJ Epinesa to take a step forward and taking those reps from him.
Yeah, like, hey, give him some competition for it. Yeah. This is one area where I do think there's a range, and I have three names that you talked about it earlier. I don't think we're going to get a lot of discounts, but if you do, it's going to be from a 30-year-old pass rusher who has already made $100 million and on their fourth contract, and I was looking for a contender and is there. Obviously, we know the biggest name that gets floated around is Chandler Jones from the upstate New York area, Syracuse, all the different pieces there. I don't think it's likely, but I'll say it's technically possible. That's the kind of guy that's possible. Mm-hmm. The Packers now $50 million for Rodgers and franchise tagging. I just drew a blank on their Devontae Adams. The rumor is they're going to have to release Zadarius Smith. That's the kind of player that would make sense. I have a sneaky one with how much is resetting down in Florida. Jason Pierre-Paul is a sneaky available free agent that I don't think is going to get a huge contract, but I think is just above the Melvin Ingram or Mario Addison type range. And I think still has enough left and has actually been playing a crazy amount of snaps that now playing him like 55, 60%. Maybe he still has, he's still a freaky athlete. So a sneaky pick. I think Jason Pierre-Paul is a legit possibility of the kind of guy that could be a pleasant surprise that like, oh, well, that's a fun ad here as a fourth defensive end along with our young guys. Right. I think that would be a cool one. So don't get me wrong. I'd love Zadarius Smith or Chandler Jones, but my shot in the dark is Jason Pierre-Paul.
Okay. And so is that your whole list or is that
for defensive ends? That was the list. I do think Melvin Ingram's in play. I think Dante Fowler's in play. I think Shaq Lawson's kind of likely, to be honest. And then I think it's, I think they'll try for a Zadarius Smith, Chandler Jones, Jason Pierre-Paul type. If they can't find a number there, I bet it's a Melvin Ingram or Dante Fowler type.
So this is very not sexy for me at the edge position. I know fans want it to be. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I've been pounding the table that it's not as bad as it seems. That the Bills pass rush this year, right? Like they were a top 10 sack team in the NFL with 42 sacks. They were 7th overall in adjusted sack percentage from Our Friends at Football Outsiders. PFF had them as one of the top rated pressure teams, and Kendall is nailing it for me. My top choice is Jerry Hughes to bring him back.
I knew it would be.
Yeah, all signs for me just keep pointing back to, I think if you're talking about a guy that you can get on a good deal, it's Jerry. Like if he probably, I hate to put emotion into the decisions that free agents are making, but this guy was here during the drought. He wants to finish the job he started in Buffalo, in my opinion, and he's made good money in his career. Yes. This is an opportunity for him to just finish what he started. I think he probably thought that would have happened over the last 2 years. We've seen guys leave like Lorenzo Alexander, Kyle Williams. I think they probably hoped that they would be able to do what Jerry has the opportunity to do, is still play at a high level and finish what you started. And Jerry is still playing at a high level. I know the sack numbers aren't there, but all the other numbers are there for Jerry. You can go check it on my Twitter, and I don't have to rattle it all off again. He's right there with some of these other bigger name free agents. Now, your Emmanuel Ogbahs are probably going to continue that production for longer than a Jerry Hughes, but the production in a vacuum of last year are very close. He's right there with Brian Burns, Ogbah, those kind of guys. Go ahead.
And he's a name that I know has been thrown out. And I don't know if it was Dave Tilton or Steve Mathis who had put it out there, but the calling that, Emmanuel Ogbah was this year's Trey Hendrickson in the free agent class. I don't even know that that's wrong. I just think somebody's going to pay him like Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like, 4 years, whatever, $72 million. He's going to get $16-18 million a year. I don't think he's going to be even close to even the Chandler Jones, Zadarius Smith range. I think he's going to get big money. Now, if he's $10 million a year, sure, that's the kind of guy that I'd love to be creative and figure out a way to make the contract work. I just don't think he's going to be even close to the range the Bills can afford.
No, and so I think you can get a guy that, again, in a vacuum, is putting up similar numbers outside of the sacks, and we all want more sacks. I'm not saying sacks aren't important, and that already fits in your defense. So I think Jerry's still got elite pass rush ability. He could hit a wall at any point. I'm not saying that either, but right now it's all pointing me back to him as the prime target, just because they're up against the cap. Other guys on this list, I think Melvin Ingram could give you something similar, just like you said. I think he's still in that range for them, and
I don't know that he's an upgrade to Jerry Hughes like some people think he is.
I don't think
they're about the same.
Yeah, I think they're about the same spot. He's not on my list, but a Justin Houston might even maybe a slight downgrade. Like they're right there together. And then other names.
And Dante Fowler too. Fowler is equal to Hughes or to Ingram.
Yeah, and so then the rest of my list from there would be downgrades. It would be a Jake Martin from Houston, who I think could be a pass rush specialist type,
and play
more
special
limited.
Team snaps.
A little bit of special team snaps from Martin as well. And then a guy I like, and I don't know if he fits in as a true edge, or if he would be more of the Lorenzo Alexander role where he can get his hand in the line of scrimmage, but maybe play some linebackers. Lorenzo Carter out of the New York Giants. I think I love his size. I love his athleticism. I don't know that they unlocked what he has the capability to do in this league in New York. And he's a guy that I think would fit well here. And then another sneaky one is, again, sort of like Oren Burks, is a guy I loved in the draft process and just hasn't been unlocked. Carl Granderson, who went to school in Wyoming with Josh Allen, big dude, long guy. Again, these would be downgrades. These would be guys you would be having compete at the bottom end of this defensive rotation. But for the top end, for me, it's Jerry Hughes.
I like it. I like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think.
Or is Tay saying here, trade for Hunter? If you can trade for Hunter, rip my list up, and I don't give a shit. I don't even care.
I'm not even joking. People, throw stuff out there about like Khalil Mack signing Chandler Jones. By far, my number one, any player that you could realistically add, because obviously, Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald are not actually available. Of any player that's even remotely realistically available in the entire NFL, Danielle Hunter's my number one.
Me too.
He would be
as long as those medicals. You get those medicals checked out for me.
Medicals check out.
Perfect.
I would go get him, and I would structure a 5-year, $100 million deal, and he could be our game wrecker opposite all the other young guys and go wreak havoc.
Yeah.
Defensive tackle or cornerback next? Which one you want?
Flip a coin. Let's go.
All right. You can lead off with your cornerbacks, and we'll do the big hog mollies last.
Yeah, so this one's fun for me because I've been kind of going back and forth here. So you brought up Sidney Jones on one of the shows a while back, and then Eric did a bunch of work on Sidney Jones and really got me interested. And he's right there for me. And I'm for the graphic that we do and the guy I pick, it's really a coin flip for me between a Sidney Jones and a Dante Jackson. And one of the things that's pushing me over the edge a little bit towards Sidney Jones right now is the conversation we had during the combine here about arm length and cornerbacks and how the success in the league of guys, it's when you see it, it's hard to ignore. And I'm not a guy that gets real rigid into, oh, these are the way things are. This is what the analytics tells us, so it has to be that way. But it is, you're looking at guys with shorter than that, whatever, 30-inch arm length are outliers that are successful in the NFL.
And I'll say, we know our friend Bruce Nolan gets very anxious about outliers. I actually had a really good conversation with him about this specifically, and it's a smart way to look at it. Outliers are a much higher risk drafting an outlier versus signing an outlier that you have 4 years of NFL film on. That mitigates the risk significantly. The risk is it won't translate and they can't play in the league. We have film evidence to confirm Dante Jackson clearly can play in the league. Now, there's limitations with his arm length, but we know it's much less risk than drafting a guy. And who's the one that McDuffie? Is he the one that had the short arms, or McCreary? Which one?
I think both of them have kind of short arms, but it's mostly McDuffie that everyone was talking about.
Yeah, and that one was like, hey, that's a more of a red flag because we haven't seen him play in the NFL.
Right. I think so. When you're talking about like a Dante Jackson and Sidney Jones, they both are limited and they both are not perfect. They are cornerback twos in this league, right? Like, and so my thing is, though, if you're going to have both guys are limited, but both guys have speed, do you take the arm length that could potentially be better, that we've seen more cornerbacks with that type of length be better, or do you take a guy and hope that he's an outlier? And so those things that I agree that having proven production matters. So, but for the sake of this conversation, for the sake of what I'm looking for this defense to add, I'm still going to stick with Dante Jackson as my top guy that I'm looking for. Maybe it's just my bias of I loved him in the draft, and I've been saying this since the free agency started that I'm going to stick with him. But then Sidney Jones would be right there. Your guy, Ahkello Witherspoon, is also right there. And if for any reason, because I think it might work out this way, where Levi's market is not what Spot Track says it is, it's not what maybe him and his team think it is, and that his best position is in this Bills defense with the Bills. And Tyler Dunn's article this week, which I'm sure everybody read, one of the things that stood out to me was that they talked about a defensive player. I was a defensive player talking. I think I know who the defensive player was. I think it was one of the defensive backs. And they were talking about the end of the game, and it wasn't Levi's fault, and talking about, hey, he is limited. We know Levi's limitations, but he is always where he needs to be. He's not going to go rogue. Like, that being Levi's fault is totally untrue. It was completely on the coaches for the call. He was doing his job. And, the player, the way he was talking about Levi, was like, he's always doing his job. He's always in position. He's always where he's supposed to be. And that type of continuity and knowing that, and the guy next to you is always going to be where he's supposed to, I think it matters more than we as fans think. And so if his market isn't what his team thinks, I think the Bills would like to have him back, just in terms of that they know what they're getting with this guy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. And I think Levi Wallace is firmly in the range of Dante Jackson and Sidney Jones, the guys you brought up. I do have Ahkello Witherspoon on my list, another tall, athletic, lanky guy, good athlete. Sidney Jones and Ahkello Witherspoon are that guy. They're a guy you hope you could bring in and coach up to play to their physical abilities, because they're frame.
And then you have Levi with speed.
Yeah,
right,
yeah, correct. Basically, that's all you're doing is now you have an actually fast version of Levi Wallace.
Trying to, yeah.
I know that we've seen, I think PFF projected it maybe. Rasul Douglas had a resurgent season with the Packers. He's another guy who's never made big money, so I don't think that he's going to be in the Bills range, but sure, if they could afford him.
There's going to be a logjam here with some of these names though, that are all in a similar space.
So if Levi Wallace goes and gets the contract Rasul Douglas thought he was going to get, and then he doesn't find his market, absolutely sign me up here. And I'm going to throw out one more sneaky name. especially if we know that Brandon Beane and company in the scouting department are leaning heavily at a corner early in the draft. I could see a Joe Hayden signing. Was a first round pick, top end elite athlete. Now he's in his early 30s and no longer that, but still a smart, heady guy who could play in a zone heavy defense that would make sense pairing with an early round pick where you don't need him to play a ton, but he can if the rookie's not ready yet. That's the kind of signing that won't excite people, but if they are leaning into taking a cornerback early in the draft, he would make more sense than spending maybe $6 or $8 million on a Sidney Jones, a Rasul Douglas, a Dante Jackson, a Levi Wallace, and then also drafting a first or second round pick. And then you either have a $8 million guy or a first round pick on the bench that sometimes that happens. But at cornerback, you don't normally see quite as much rotation as like defensive line and things like that. So, that's one where maybe they could tip their hand a little bit that, hey, they are looking to go with a draft pick early in the day 1, day 2. I think Joe Hayden's a possibility.
I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
All right. I will kick us off then with defensive tackles, which is a fun one. We put a lot of time and effort into this. And I know a couple people asked here, so I'm going to answer a couple questions in the chat. Amy saying that we only have 2 million available. Ouch. You're right, but that's as of today.
Yeah.
With some extensions, restructures, trades, more releases, they're pretty quickly going to get themselves to 15, 20, 25 million in cap space just to have the functional room. Those things are coming. Don't worry. They're going to have enough money to function as a franchise. They may not get all the way to the 45 or 50 million that we've had fun doing on some of our shows talking about with coupons that they could cash in, but they're going to get into a functional range of at least 15 or 20 million to be able to do it. And they can do that with some pay cuts, with some restructures and some extensions that aren't going to lose any more major players. So they'll be fine. In an example, we talked about Cole Beasley earlier. He's $6 million in cap space. That's another big chunk that all of a sudden, boom, you jump from 2 million to 8 million very quickly. You extend Stephon Diggs, you could create another like 8 or 9 million in extending him and giving him future money. Boom, all of a sudden, those two moves, you're at $17 million.
And that's one I usually believe Brandon Beane. I don't believe that he has not talked to Stephon Diggs reps about a possible extension. I think that there's been negotiations on that. Yeah. I can almost guarantee it.
So before I get into the defensive tackles here, Taylor asks, how much is Harry going to cost? I went with the idea. I think the Bills I think we've heard that they've had good discussions and exchange offers and are in a good space. And I think that there's a strong possibility that they bring him back and add a free agent defensive tackle. So I'm going to list a couple guys that I think would be instead. And then a couple guys I think you could pair with it. So obviously, I expect you to probably have Akeem Hicks on your list, but he's probably a guy that would be instead of Harry. I think he's a guy that would cost us a little much. I think Derek Notty's right there in that range. I like Linval Joseph a lot. I've liked him forever. He's one of the strongest humans on earth. He's just fantastic. Anything he does, he can push the pocket, but is an amazing run defender and impacts it. I think he's getting at an age where if we get the right kind of deal with Harrison Phillips, I think a 1-year deal for Linval Joseph is possible to do along with him, but there's a chance somebody pays him $8 million and we just can't afford it. The one name that has been kicked around that I know Eric's a big fan of as well is Daquan Jones. He's the guy that I think is probably, if we're going to pair somebody with Harrison Phillips, he's the most likely guy that I think you could get for, Harrison Phillips signs for 3 years, 15 million, but the first year cap hit is like 3 million, and you could get Daquan Jones for like 4 million, and all of a sudden you spent 7 million on defensive tackle, and you're totally fine. Like that's a totally functional spend. And adding Daquan Jones along with Harrison Phillips, we would have a stout, strong one tech anytime that we needed. And just like Harrison Phillips, Daquan Jones can move the needle a little bit. So my actual wish is probably Linval Joseph, but my prediction is probably Daquan Jones.
Gotcha. I think we had pretty much the same names here. So my top choice is Linval Joseph for sure. I think he fills exactly what I'm looking for out of this defense. I'd love to see him next to Ed Oliver. I'd love to see him helping Tremaine Edmunds and Matt Milano stay clean. I think that's the biggest need. I think Daquan Jones can also do those things, but I've like you, I've loved Linval Joseph for a long time, and I'd love to see him in the middle of this defense. And then still, it wouldn't prevent me from drafting a big guy to learn behind Linval Joseph, because that's a 1-year deal for me. Is you're just getting him here 1 year to really, it's for an evaluation of Tremaine Edmunds and to know what I'm getting there. That's why I'm investing
to train Jordan Davis.
Yes, absolutely. Please. I feel like that's another topic for another day. I feel like that ship has sailed for us, unfortunately.
I don't. He might not make it out of the top 10 now. It's just insane.
Yeah, it sucks. And then Derek Nottie is a guy that since free agency started, he was right up there for me. It's a player I love, but I can't tell where his valuation can be, because in my mind, he should be one of the top defensive tackles that is in free agency. But every time I see a list from people that I think are smart of the top guys, he's not quite there. So I don't know what the NFL is going to give him for value. But if the value's there, I'd love to add a guy like that. You were right. Akeem Hicks is on my list, but it's a little bit more of a dream of just, I really like Akeem Hicks and he's a really good player, and I would love to add good players to my team. And again, to your point, it's if somebody makes Harrison Phillips an offer that he just can't refuse the get, like you said, to get that money the first time you're available in free agency. More power to him, and bring in Akeem Hicks to fill that void for a little bit. And then a guy you like, Tim Settle, I think would be a good consolation prize to if you lose Harrison Phillips. A Tim Settle type, I think could fill that role and add a big body.
And I'll say a guy that, when you talk about, we opened it up with Albert Breer's report, the fact that high-end free agents are calling about the Bills now means that, sure, a guy like Calais Campbell would be similar to Akeem Hicks. Like, if a guy like that just decides, hey, I want to be on that team, and that they say, sure, absolutely. It's not a perfect fit for our scheme and the way that we're
looking for more of a one tech type.
Yeah. But hey, if a guy like that wants to play for the Bills, God bless him. Absolutely. We'll figure it out.
And Bean just alluded to that on the offensive side of the ball of, like, they were talking what's, Dorsey going to do. And like their view is, work with what you've got. If we got 2 good tight ends, you're going to put those 2 good tight ends on the field. And I think the same goes for the defense, where like, we do need certain pieces, and we want to see certain pieces to offset the weaknesses of the way we play defense. But if you have a chance to add a Calais Campbell, you do it.
You figure out how to do it. Right. And a lot of guys in the chat asking here about, what are we thinking on Star? My assumption is that Star is going to retire. That's purely assuming and speculation. He is under contract. He should be back here. He has an obligation, because he's under contract, to be at mandatory mini camps, to be at training camp. So I doubt we're going to find that out. I have a feeling the Bills know. And because if he does want to retire, they would have an incentive to be like, hey, don't make us fine you for not coming to those things. Why don't we work out reducing some of that, $2.5 million in guaranteed salary? We can reduce that and you walk away. If he's up to it and playing, it's better than eating all the dead cap for him not to play and having to pay another defensive tackle. So, I guess if it's Harrison Phillips back and Star back again, I'll live with it.
Sure.
But, I am going to assume that we've seen the last of him, but he is under contract, so he is technically on the team. And, there's ways you could work around that to try to approach him about some kind of, especially if he's going to play, some kind of restructured pay, not restructure, because you don't want to kick any money into next year, but maybe some kind of pay cut on the guaranteed portion of it to reduce down the base salary at least. I don't know.
Yeah, and Star I'm torn on, because obviously we heard all about how great he was, the impact he was making this summer, and then we saw it early in the year, and then
genuinely good those first 6 games or so.
Yeah, and then he ran into a wall in the middle, or kind of sort of later in the season, with injuries, COVID.
Got COVID.
Had the heart
he
had
issue.
Injuries too, didn't he? And so that when he came back, he just wasn't the same. He didn't have the same impact, and I don't know if it was all those things impacted, and then we finally saw him hit that age wall, and this is sort of the player he is, or if it was such an impact of the injuries and off the field stuff and COVID stuff where he just wasn't the same guy for those few games coming back, and he just has to reset and he'll come back and be a disruptive player. I'm not sure. And there's a lot of unknown with Star. So I'm sort of with you where, like, yeah, maybe if you get him back, you can recapture some of that early 2021 magic that he had and maybe milk another year out of it. But it's an unknown, and I don't know if you can get that out of him. If you can, great. I would love to line up that star that we saw at the first half of 2021 and roll that with Harrison and Ed Oliver and those guys playing as well as they were at the end of the year. But I just don't know. And then that cap hit's scary. So I think I'm leaning with you where I think he's seeing the writing on the wall and maybe will retire as well.
Yeah, we'll see where that goes. And, I think there's a good way around it. But let's recap for the folks. So my official list at defensive tackle, my choice was Daquan Jones. At defensive end, my choice was Jason Pierre-Paul. At linebacker, I had Zaire Franklin. At cornerback, I'm going to go with Akella Witherspoon as my official name. And at safety, I had Ronnie Harrison. And who is your final list for the people?
All right, so I'm giving my final list is at safety, Dean Marlowe. At linebacker, I'm going to go with Oren Burks for my official. At edge, my guy Jerry Hughes, baby. At cornerback, I'm sticking with my guy Dante Jackson. And then at defensive tackle, I'm going Linval Joseph.
Love it. Beautiful. So any final thoughts for the people? How about this? How much do you expect to happen before our next show? So obviously, for anyone who's not familiar, the legal tampering window opens on Monday. I believe the official time is noon on Monday. It might be 4 p.m., but I think it's noon. So between then and our show, technically 4 p.m. on Wednesday is when contracts can officially be signed. Do you think the Buffalo Bills are a team that is going to be active in the first 2 days of free agency?
I think we'll pretty much have a good grasp of what that Bills free agency is going to look like before we're on and before free agency actually begins. I think we don't get a lot of rumors from the Bills, but this time of year, agents are super leaky, and they're going to be leaking out stuff for those 2 days in a row. And so if any of those splash rumors are true, you'll definitely hear those ones. Those will be out almost
and
instantly.
Just a reminder, some years, 1 year our first signing was Frank Gore. So like sometimes the big sign, I think Efe Obada and Matt Breida were all within that first window. So it's not only big time signings that are during that window.
They're during that window for sure. But I think if we're gonna have one of those splash ones, you'll hear it before our show. You'll hear the rumblings coming that the Bills are making a big move. But I think we'll have a pretty decent grasp of at least how they're going to approach it before our show kicks off. If you don't hear a lot, I think it might be more like Joe B's mock off season where it's not super sexy. And it's just hey, we're going to run it back with a pretty mild approach to this free agency process, but it's going to be quite active. The Bills have now remaining 17 pending free agents or 15 pending free agents. So
15 now with Saran and I think it's probably that range.
So you got 15 pending free agents. Not all of those are holes you need to fill in free agent, but they're going to add a dozen dudes here in the next week or so. So they'll be busy, and it might not be all the names you want, but it's definitely going to be a busy week. I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm excited to come next week and see if we have any flashy new toys to play with.
It's really funny that Michael predicted this. Your man Pat Moran so we're going to try to rekindle it. I'm going to be on with Pat Moran live Monday night. The last time I was on with Pat live during free agency, the Bills traded for Stephon Diggs during the show while we were on live at the same time. So either a big splashy signing, being after dark and all the fun that we've had with that. Pat Moran and I are trying to jinx our way back into that to see if we can scurry something together. So check that out. I'll be on live with Pat late Monday night to be able to check that out and to react to some of the stuff going on. But I agree with Aaron. I think we will see movement. I think we will see some signings. I don't expect anything all that amazingly exciting. I think it's going to be some of the tier of names that we talked about. And you could see a Linval Joseph or a Jason Pierre-Paul, or we talked before, heck, a Rob Gronkowski. That's not out of the question. We could see a move like that during that window. I don't think it's going to be the high-end, crazy, top level guys, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to add talent to this already very talented, very capable team to make them an even stronger current number one betting favorite in in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. So plenty of reason to be excited. We're going to be here with you all week long. So next week's going to be a fun one to stay connected to everybody on Cover One. We've got shows for you, multiple every single night of the week, ready to go. And we've got a new show brewing that we're going to be excited to announce very soon here. So keep your eyes open. A new show for Friday night that's going to be joining the lineup. So a lot of fun things going on. Any final thoughts for the people before we sign off here?
Yeah, no, enjoy this next week. This is what we've all been waiting for here for a few weeks. This is really what kicks off this portion of the series, right? We've been in a little bit of a purgatory between that Kansas City game and what looks to the future of the 2022 Bills. So this all starts here next week. So the 2022 Bills starts. You can kind of get over or get past that terrible emotional KC loss and look to what this future is going to look like. And I'm excited. I do think there's going to be at least one thing that gets the fan base excited, whether it's a name like a Gronkowski or something like that gets us excited and gets our imaginations running wild of how that's going to impact the future of this team, what they're going to look like here this next year. So that's what I'm excited for.
I love it. And I guarantee you I'm going to get excited about whoever they sign, regardless of how good they are, because that's just what I do. I talk myself into whatever's needed. So appreciate you guys checking us out tonight. Awesome job in the chat. We appreciate you guys very, very much. On behalf of Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are